The massive space station called Zenith 7 floated in the darkness between stars. It was home to thousands of beings from across the galaxy, all living and working together in the cold void of space. The station rotated slowly, creating artificial gravity in some sections while others remained weightless. It was a place where many species learned to cooperate, though they did not always understand each other. Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead and looked at the metal beam floating in front of him. The human engineer had been working on the station for 8 months now, and he still found the mix of gravity and weightlessness strange. This section of the docking bay had partial gravity, about 60% of what he grew up with on Earth. It made everything feel lighter, but also harder to control. Next to him stood Vexilor, a member of the Krashi species. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Vexilor was the supervisor for this construction project, and he ran things with careful precision. He checked every measurement twice and never rushed through safety procedures. Working below them was Tilmo, a Relian with 4 arms and a body covered in smooth gray scales. Tilmo had worked in space construction for 30 years, longer than Jake had been alive. Despite their differences, Jake had come to respect the 4-armed alien. They often shared meals together in the station cafeteria, trading stories about their home worlds. The beam they were installing weighed 300 kilograms. In the partial gravity of this section, it felt lighter, but it was still dangerous. Anti-gravity clamps held it in place while Tilmo adjusted the mounting brackets below. The clamps hummed with energy, keeping the massive piece of metal suspended in the air. Jake checked his data pad, reviewing the installation sequence one more time. Everything looked correct. The beam would slide into place between 2 support columns, forming part of the new docking bay expansion. Ships from across the galaxy would eventually dock here, making Zenith 7 one of the busiest trade stations in this sector. Vexilor gave the signal to proceed. Jake activated the positioning controls, and the beam began to move slowly toward its final location. Tilmo watched from below, his 4 hands ready to guide the beam into the mounting brackets. It was routine work, something they had done dozens of times before. Then the lights flickered. Jake felt his stomach drop as the anti-gravity clamps made a strange whining sound. The power indicators on his control panel flashed red. Somewhere in the station, a power surge was causing problems. He tried to compensate, adjusting the backup systems, but everything was happening too fast. The anti-gravity clamps failed. The beam began to fall. In the partial gravity, it dropped slower than it would have on Earth, but it was still falling directly toward Tilmo. The Relian looked up, his eyes wide with fear. His species had hollow bones designed for low-gravity environments. The beam would crush him instantly. Jake did not think. He simply moved. His legs pushed off the deck, launching him forward. He covered the distance in 2 long strides, diving beneath the falling beam. His back hit the metal first, then his shoulders. The weight crashed down on him like a collapsing building. His knees buckled and slammed into the deck. Pain exploded through his back and shoulders. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. The 300 kilograms pressed down on him, trying to drive him into the floor. His vision blurred, and his lungs struggled to pull in air. But he held it. Jake's legs shook with the effort. His spine felt like it was being compressed into nothing. His shoulders burned with a pain he had never experienced before, but he kept his body rigid, keeping the beam from crushing Tilmo beneath him. Time seemed to stop. Jake could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He could feel every kilogram of weight trying to break his body. His hands pressed against the deck, fingers spread wide, trying to find any extra support. Around him, the other workers stood frozen in shock. Vexilor's mouth hung open, his usually calm face showing pure disbelief. The other crew members stared, unable to process what they were seeing. A human was holding up a 300-kilogram beam with his body. 15 seconds passed. To Jake, it felt like 15 years. His legs began to give out. His vision darkened at the edges. He could taste blood in his mouth where he had bitten his tongue. Then the lights stopped flickering. The power surge ended. The anti-gravity clamps hummed back to life, their energy fields grabbing the beam and lifting it away from Jake's shoulders. The moment the weight lifted, Jake collapsed. He fell forward onto his hands and knees, gasping for air. His entire body trembled. He could feel something warm running down his back and realized it was blood. The beam had torn through his work shirt and scraped his skin. Tilmo scrambled backward, his forearms shaking. He stared at Jake with an expression that the human could not read. Was it fear, gratitude, shock? Maybe all three. Vexillor moved first. The Krashi supervisor activated his emergency communicator, calling for medical assistance. His voice, usually so steady and controlled, shook as he spoke. Other workers rushed forward to help, but they stopped a few feet away, unsure what to do. Jake tried to stand, but his legs would not support him. He remained on his hands and knees, breathing in short, painful gasps. His back felt like someone had taken a hammer to it repeatedly. His shoulders were probably dislocated or broken or both. He could not tell anymore. Everything just hurt. The medical team arrived within minutes. Dr. Lisa Chen, the station's human doctor, knelt beside Jake immediately. She was speaking to him, asking him questions, but he could barely hear her over the ringing in his ears. He felt her hands carefully checking his spine, his shoulders, his ribs. Behind her came Sola, a crystalline being from the Thanix species. Sola's body refracted light in strange ways, making her look like a walking prism. She was a medical specialist who had treated hundreds of species, and she carried scanning equipment that looked like nothing from Earth. They loaded Jake onto a stretcher. As they carried him away, he turned the medical bay on Zenith 7 was designed to treat dozens of different species. The walls were lined with equipment that could scan everything from silicon-based life forms to beings made of pure energy. Right now, all of that equipment was focused on one human lying on an examination table. Jake Morrison stared at the ceiling and tried not to move. Every small shift of his body sent waves of pain through his back and shoulders. Dr. Lisa Chen had given him something for the pain, but she said she wanted to run tests before giving him anything stronger. He understood. They needed to know exactly what damage had been done. Sola moved around the table, her crystalline body making soft, chiming sounds as she walked. The Thanix healer held a scanning device over Jake's spine, watching the readings with what might have been fascination. It was hard to tell with a being whose face looked like cut glass. "This is remarkable," Sola said, her voice like wind through crystal caves. "The vertebrae show microfractures, but the structure remains intact. The intervertebral discs absorbed much of the impact. How is this possible?" Dr. Chen studied the holographic display showing Jake's skeleton. "Human spinal architecture evolved to handle vertical compression loads. Our ancestors walked upright on a high-gravity world. The spine developed to manage those forces." Vexillor stood in the corner of the room, his thin arms crossed over his chest. He had not left since Jake arrived. The Krashi supervisor seemed unable to accept what he had witnessed. 300 kilograms, he said quietly. "I watched it fall. I saw the impact. He should have been crushed immediately." "Most species would have been," Dr. Chen agreed. She zoomed in on the image of Jake's shoulder blade. "See here? Microfractures in the scapula, severe bruising of the trapezius and latissimus dorsi muscles. Significant strain on the erector spinae muscle group. It looks terrible, and it certainly hurts, but none of it is permanent damage." Sola made a sound like breaking ice. It was how her species expressed disbelief. If a Krashi attempted this action, their skeleton would shatter. The hollow bone structure cannot withstand such force. "Relians would fare no better," added another voice. Tilmo entered the medical bay slowly, as if afraid he might be intruding. His 4 arms hung at his sides, and his scaled face showed clear distress. "My people are built for low gravity. Our bones are light, designed for agility. That beam would have broken every bone in my body." Jake tried to speak, but only managed a rough whisper. Dr. Chen immediately moved to his side, checking his vital signs. "Do not try to talk yet. Your muscles are severely traumatized. You need rest." But Jake shook his head slightly. He looked at Tilmo and managed 2 words. "You okay?" The Relian's eyes, all 4 of them, began to leak fluid. It took Jake a moment to realize that Tilmo was crying. The alien's tears were thicker than human tears, almost like oil, but the emotion behind them was unmistakable. "I am alive because you destroyed your body to save me," Tilmo said, his voice breaking. "Why would you do this? We are not even the same species. You owed me nothing." Jake wanted to explain that Tilmo was his friend, that he would do it again without hesitation, that it was just the right thing to do. But his body would not cooperate. The pain medication was starting to make him drowsy, and speaking required too much effort. Dr. Chen spoke for him. "Humans have a tendency toward self-sacrifice. It is not unique to our species, but we seem to have a lower threshold for it than most. We act before we think, especially when someone we care about is in danger." Vexillor uncrossed his arms and moved closer to the examination table. "But the physical capability, the strength to hold that weight even for a few seconds, where does it come from?" "Earth," Dr. Chen said simply. She pulled up a comparison chart on the holographic display. Earth has a gravity of 1.0 standard, which is higher than 70% of homeworlds in the known galaxy. Humans evolved in that environment. Our bones are dense, our muscles attached to our skeleton at angles that provide mechanical advantage for lifting and carrying. She highlighted different sections of the skeletal display. Human bone is a composite material. The outer layer is compact bone, very dense and strong. Inside is trabecular bone, which is lighter but still structural. This combination gives us both strength and flexibility. Sola studied the display with intense focus. The bone density is significantly higher than Krashi or Relian standards, but that alone cannot explain survival. The impact force should have caused catastrophic failure regardless of density. "That is where the muscles come in," Dr. Chen continued. She showed an overlay of Jake's muscular system. Humans have powerful back muscles, the erector spinae, the trapezius, the latissimus dorsi. These muscles can generate enormous force. When Jake caught that beam, his muscles engaged to distribute the load across his entire back and shoulders. "He turned his body into a shock absorber," Vexillor said slowly, understanding dawning in his large black eyes. "Exactly," Dr. Chen confirmed. "It was not pleasant, and he will need weeks to recover fully. But his body was capable of surviving it because human physiology includes redundancies and robustness that evolved over millions of years." The door to the medical bay opened again. This time, more aliens entered. Word had spread through the station about what happened, and people wanted to see the human who survived the impossible. There were Tyrillians with their thick, armored hides. There were Arconians with their large craniums and small bodies. There were species Jake had never seen before, all coming to witness something they did not believe could exist. Dr. Chen moved to block their view of Jake. "He needs rest. You can all satisfy your curiosity later." But Jake raised one hand slightly, stopping her. He understood what was happening. These beings needed to see that he was real, that what happened actually occurred. In a galaxy where most species were fragile compared to the harsh environments that birthed them, humans were an anomaly. Sola addressed the gathered crowd. "This human survived an impact that would kill most of you instantly. His species evolved on a world where survival required physical robustness. They are stronger than they appear, more durable than seems reasonable." One of the Arconians stepped forward. His name was Krell, and he worked in the station's research division. Is this typical for humans? Can all of them withstand such forces? Dr. Chen considered the question carefully. Jake is fit because his job requires physical strength. But yes, most healthy adult humans could potentially survive what he did given the right circumstances. We are built to endure. The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 30 years ago. They were still considered newcomers, still learning the rules and customs, but now suddenly they were being seen in a different light. Tilmo moved to stand beside Jake's table. The Relian reached out with one of his 4 hands, hovering it over Jake's arm, but not quite touching, afraid of causing more pain. "My people have a tradition," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "When someone saves your life, you become bond kin, family not by blood but by choice and debt." From a pouch on his belt, Tilmo produced a small metal token. It was circular, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. "This is a bond token. My family made it 3 generations ago. It has been passed down, waiting for the moment when a debt so great must be acknowledged." He placed the token on the table next to Jake's hand. "You are bond kin now, Jake Morrison. My family is your family. My life is yours, as you proved yours could be mine." Jake's fingers slowly closed around the token. It was warm from being carried close to Tilmo's body. He managed a small nod, accepting the honor even though he did not fully understand its weight. Vexilor watched this exchange with an expression that might have been respect. The Krashi supervisor had seen many things in his long career, but this was unique. "I will file a full report," he announced to the room. "The Galactic Workplace Safety Council needs to understand what occurred here. We may need to revise our protocols for mixed-species work environments." Dr. Chen frowned. "Be careful how you phrase that report. I do not want humans being treated as expendable just because we can survive more punishment than other species." "That is not my intention," Vexilor assured her. "But we cannot ignore what we have learned today. Humans are different. That difference needs to be understood and respected." 3 weeks passed before Jake Morrison could return to full duty. During that time, his story spread across the galaxy like wildfire through dry grass. News networks from 100 worlds broadcast the security footage. Scientists debated human physiology in academic journals, and Jake himself became something he never wanted to be: famous. He sat in the station cafeteria, picking at his lunch while trying to ignore the stares. Even now, aliens from different species would stop their conversations to look at him. Some pointed, others whispered. A few approached to ask questions, though station security had started intervening to give Jake some peace. Dr. Lisa Chen joined him at the table, setting down her tray with a sigh. "You look tired." "I feel like an exhibit in a zoo," Jake said. He took a bite of his sandwich, which tasted like cardboard. Everything tasted like cardboard lately. "I just want to go back to work and have people forget about this." "That is not going to happen," Dr. Chen said gently. "What you did changed things. Whether you meant to or not, you showed the galaxy something they did not know about humans." Jake pushed his tray away. "I showed them that humans can be stupid enough to throw themselves under falling objects. That is not exactly a point of pride." Before Dr. Chen could respond, Vexilor approached their table. The Krashi supervisor looked uncomfortable, which was unusual for him. "Jake Morrison, I apologize for the interruption. But there are visitors who wish to speak with you. They have traveled far." Jake looked up and saw a group of aliens waiting near the cafeteria entrance. Leading them was an Arconian with elaborate robes marked with symbols Jake did not recognize. Next to him stood a human woman in a formal suit, and several other beings from species Jake had never encountered. "Who are they?" Jake asked. "Ambassador Krelvin from the Arconian Institute of Xenobiological Studies," Vexilor explained. and Dr. Mira Vasquez, a human scientist who specializes in comparative species physiology. They have requested permission to interview you. Jake wanted to refuse. He wanted to tell them to leave him alone, to let him return to his normal life, but Dr. Chen touched his arm gently. You should hear what they have to say. This is bigger than just you now. Reluctantly, Jake agreed. They moved to a private conference room where the delegation waited. Ambassador Krelvin settled his small body into a chair designed for Arconians, his large head seeming too heavy for his thin neck. Dr. Vasquez remained standing, studying Jake with obvious scientific interest. Mr. Morrison, Krelvin began, his voice high and musical, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Your actions 3 weeks ago have sparked considerable interest throughout the scientific community. I did not do anything special, Jake said, repeating the words he had said 100 times. I helped a friend. That is all. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes were sharp and analytical. That is where you are wrong. What you did was remarkable, and not just because you survived. It was remarkable because it revealed something about human nature that we have been trying to explain to the galactic community for decades. She activated a holographic display that showed various alien species side by side with humans. Every species develops based on their homeworld environment. The Krashi evolved on a low-gravity moon with thin atmosphere. They developed hollow bones for agility and large eyes for dim light. The Relians come from an ocean world with variable gravity depending on depth. Their 4 arms and light skeleton allow them to swim efficiently. The display zoomed in on human anatomy. Humans evolved on Earth, a high-gravity world with extreme climate variations. Your species had to survive ice ages, droughts, predators, and diseases. You developed dense bones, powerful muscles, and an immune system that can adapt to almost anything. I know all this, Jake said. Dr. Chen explained it. But do you understand what it means? Krelvin asked. In the galactic community, most species specialize. They excel at one thing. The Arconians have massive brains and intellectual capacity. The Tyrillians have armored hides and strength. The Vexians can survive in extreme radiation. But humans are generalists. You are good at many things, excellent at surviving. Dr. Vasquez continued the explanation. When you caught that beam, you did not just demonstrate physical strength. You demonstrated adaptability, quick decision-making, and risk assessment. You calculated in a split second that your body could potentially survive the impact, while Tilmo's could not. Then you acted on that calculation without hesitation. I did not calculate anything, Jake protested. I just moved. Exactly, Dr. Vasquez said with a small smile. That is the point. Your instincts are finely tuned for survival and for protecting others. Most species have to think before acting. Humans act and think simultaneously. It is part of your evolutionary advantage. One of the other aliens in the delegation spoke up. It was a being made of what looked like liquid metal, a Mercurian from the outer systems. We have been studying the security footage. The impact force has been calculated. The stress on your skeletal structure, the muscle engagement, the neurological response, all of it has been analyzed. The Mercurian's form shifted, displaying images within its body. What we found is fascinating. Your body has multiple systems that activated during the incident. Your adrenal glands released chemicals that increased strength and pain tolerance. Your muscle fibers engaged in a pattern that distributed force efficiently. Your bones flexed slightly, absorbing energy that would have otherwise caused fractures. All species have stress responses, Jake said. Yes, but not like humans, Krelvin explained. Your stress response is aggressive and powerful. It allows you to perform beyond your normal capabilities in emergency situations. We call it hysterical strength in humans. Other species simply shut down when faced with overwhelming threat. Dr. Vasquez sat down across from Jake. We want to study you, Jake, not as a lab specimen, but as a representative of your species. We want to understand the limits of human capability. How much can you lift? How much impact can you survive? How fast do you heal? These questions matter. Why? Jake asked. So you can figure out how to use humans as living shields? The room fell silent. Dr. Chen, who had been quiet until now, nodded approvingly. That is a valid concern, she said. I share it. Krelvin raised one small hand. I understand your worry, but that is not our intention. We want to understand humans because you are joining the galactic community. Already there are calls from various organizations to recruit humans for dangerous work. Some see you as ideal rescue workers, others see potential soldiers. We want to provide accurate information so that decisions are based on facts, not assumptions. What kind of tests? Jake asked cautiously. Dr. Vasquez pulled up a list on the holographic display. Controlled lifting tests to measure strength, impact resistance tests using progressive loads, healing rate analysis, pain tolerance assessment, all voluntary, all compensated, and all designed to establish baseline human capabilities. Jake studied the list. Part of him wanted to refuse, to tell them to find someone else. But another part understood that this was important. If people were going to make decisions about humans based on what he did, those decisions should be based on accurate information. Will other humans be tested too? He asked. Yes, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. We are recruiting volunteers from across human space. We want a diverse sample that includes different ages, genders, and fitness levels. You are not special, Jake. You are normal. That is what makes this so important. Tilmo entered the conference room, moving quietly on his 4 legs. He had been recovering from his own trauma, the psychological shock of nearly dying. He approached Jake's chair and placed one hand on the human's shoulder. You should do this, the Relian said softly. The galaxy needs to understand what happened. They need to know that humans are strong, yes, but also that you use that strength to protect others. Both truths matter. Jake looked around the room at the assembled beings. Scientists, ambassadors, friends. They all watched him, waiting for his decision. He thought about the workers on the station who now understood that humans could be counted on in emergencies. He thought about future humans who might face discrimination or exploitation based on incomplete information. Okay, he said finally. I will do your tests. But I have conditions. Name them, Krelvin said. First, all data gets shared publicly. No secret reports that only governments see. Second, you make it clear that I am not special. Any human could have done what I did. Third, you emphasize the why, not just the how. I did not save Tilmo because I am strong. I saved him because he is my friend. Dr. Vasquez smiled. Those are reasonable conditions. We accept. Over the next week, Jake underwent more medical tests than he thought possible. They measured his strength, tested his reflexes, analyzed his bone density. They had him lift weights, endure impacts from progressively heavier objects, and perform feats of endurance. The results were exactly what Dr. Vasquez predicted. Jake was strong for a human, but not exceptionally so. His bone density was within normal range for someone his age and profession. His muscle mass was good but not remarkable. He was, in every measurable way, an average, healthy human male, which meant that billions of other humans could potentially do what he did. This information spread quickly through galactic channels. Some species found it comforting, knowing that humans could be reliable in dangerous situations. Others found it unsettling, realizing that humanity represented a form of durability they could not match. Jake sat with Dr. Chen in her office, reviewing the final report before it was published. Do you think this will help? He asked. I think it will start necessary conversations, she said, about what it means to work alongside humans, about how to design safety systems for mixed species environments, about the strengths and limitations of different species. And the part about why I did it? Jake asked. Did they include that? Dr. Chen scrolled to a section near the end of the report. Right here. Dr. Vasquez wrote an entire chapter on human altruistic behavior. She argues that your physical capabilities matter less than your willingness to use them for others. Jake nodded slowly. That felt right. The strength to lift heavy things was useful, but the choice to use that strength for good was what actually mattered. Centaurus Prime was unlike any world Jake Morrison had ever seen. The planet served as a neutral meeting ground for the galactic community, and its capital city reflected that diversity. Buildings designed for water-dwelling species stood next to towers meant for beings who breathed methane. The streets accommodated everything from tiny insect-like creatures to massive beings that moved on 6 legs. Jake stood at the window of his hotel room, watching the alien crowds below. In 2 hours, he would address the Galactic Workplace Safety Conference. Hundreds of delegates from across known space would listen to him speak about an incident he still did not fully understand. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Lisa Chen entered, followed by Tilmo and Dr. Mira Vasquez. The 3 had accompanied Jake to Centaurus Prime, providing support for what everyone agreed would be a challenging presentation. "Are you ready?" Dr. Chen asked. "No," Jake said honestly. "I am an engineer, not a public speaker. I work with metal and equations, not crowds and politics." Tilmo moved to stand beside Jake at the window. The Relian had been quiet during the journey to Centaurus Prime, clearly struggling with his own emotions about the incident. "You saved my life," he said softly. "Now you must help the galaxy understand why. That is your burden now." "Heavy burden," Jake muttered. "You have carried heavier," Tilmo replied, and there might have been humor in his voice. It was hard to tell with Relians. The conference hall was massive, designed to accommodate thousands of beings with different environmental needs. Sections of the room had different atmospheres separated by force fields. Temperature zones varied from freezing to boiling. Some delegates sat on chairs while others floated, swam, or stood on specialized platforms. Jake walked onto the stage feeling incredibly small. He wore a simple suit, nothing fancy. Dr. Vasquez had advised him to appear approachable, normal. The goal was not to seem like a superhero, but like a regular human who had done something anyone might do. A Vexian moderator, its crystalline form refracting the stage lights into rainbows, introduced Jake to the assembly. The translation devices built into the conference hall converted the moderator's language into something everyone could understand. Then it was Jake's turn to speak. He stood at the podium and looked out at the sea of alien faces. So many species, so many different ways of seeing the world, and they all wanted to understand humans. "My name is Jake Morrison," he began, his voice amplified throughout the hall. "I am an engineer. I work in construction. What happened on Zenith 7 was not planned. It was not heroic. It was just a reaction." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "A beam fell. My friend was under it. I moved. That is all. But apparently, that simple action raised a lot of questions about humans, about our capabilities, about our nature." On the screens around the hall, footage of the incident played. Jake watched himself dive under the beam, saw his body buckle under the weight, saw the moment he collapsed after the anti-gravity clamps reactivated. Watching it felt strange, like seeing someone else's life. "The scientists have explained the physical part," Jake continued. "Human bone density, muscle structure, evolutionary adaptation to high gravity. All true. My body could handle the impact because Earth made me that way. But that is not why I did it." He clicked to the next slide, which showed images of Tilmo and his family. I did it because Tilmo is my friend. We share meals together. We solve problems together. We laugh at each other's jokes, even when we do not understand them. When I saw him in danger, I did not think about species or biology. I just thought about saving my friend. A voice called out from the audience. It was a Tyrillian labor representative, his thick hide marked with union symbols. But should humans be assigned to more dangerous work because you can survive it? Many employers are already arguing for this. Jake had expected this question. No. Just because we can survive something does not mean we should be expected to. Would you ask the Arconians to solve every difficult problem because they are smart? Would you force the Vexians to work in radiation zones just because they can tolerate it? He leaned forward, his voice firm. Capability is not obligation. Yes. Humans can take more physical punishment than some species, but that does not make us expendable. It makes us different, and differences should be respected, not exploited. Another voice, this time from a corporate administrator whose species Jake did not recognize. But in emergency situations, would it not be logical to have humans in positions where their durability matters? Maybe, Jake admitted. But only if humans choose those positions. Only if they are compensated fairly. Only if they are valued for their choice, not just their biology. Dr. Vasquez stood from her seat in the front row. If I may add something, she said, and the moderator granted permission. Humans are generalists. We can adapt to many roles. Yes, we are physically durable, but we are also creative, social, and capable of complex problem-solving. Reducing us to living safety equipment misses the point of what makes humans valuable members of the galactic community. The conference room buzzed with translated conversations. Delegates debated among themselves, processing this information. Jake could see different reactions on different faces. Some seemed convinced. Others looked skeptical. A few appeared calculating, already thinking about how to use this information for their own purposes. An Arconian scholar raised a delicate hand. There is another aspect to consider. You mentioned acting without thinking. Is this not dangerous? Should not all actions be carefully considered before execution? Jake smiled slightly. For some species, yes, but humans evolved as both predators and prey. We had to make split-second decisions about danger, run or fight, hide or attack. Our brains process threats quickly and our bodies respond even faster. Sometimes that means we act foolishly. Sometimes it means we save lives. It is who we are. Tilmo stood up in the audience. His forearms trembled slightly, but his voice was clear. I speak as someone who was saved. Jake Morrison valued my life over his own safety. He risked permanent injury or death for me. That choice, that willingness to sacrifice, is what I remember. Not the strength of his body, but the strength of his character. The Relian's words seemed to shift something in the room. Jake saw several delegates nodding or making gestures of agreement in their own species' ways. The conversation was changing from what humans could do to why they did it. After the formal presentation ended, Jake was surrounded by delegates wanting to speak with him privately. Some had genuine questions about workplace safety. Others wanted to discuss hiring humans for their organizations. A few were simply curious, wanting to meet the human who had become famous across the galaxy. During a brief break, Jake found himself standing on a balcony overlooking the city with Captain Ben Rodriguez. The merchant ship captain had arrived at Centaurus Prime for a trade negotiation and heard about Jake's presentation. You did well in there, Ben said, offering Jake a drink from a flask. Jake accepted, grateful for something familiar in this very alien place. Did I change any minds? Jake asked. Some, Ben replied. But that was not the real goal. The real goal was to make them think about humans differently, not as tools or weapons, but as people with our own choices and values. Jake took a sip from the flask and immediately regretted it. Whatever Ben was drinking burned like fire going down. What is this? Vexian spirit alcohol. Picked it up on my last trade run. Terrible stuff, but it grows on you. Ben laughed at Jake's expression. See, that is another human trait. We will try anything once, even if it might kill us. Ambassador Patricia Wells joined them on the balcony. The Earth representative looked tired but satisfied. I have been in meetings all day with various species representatives. Your presentation started important conversations, Jake. Some good, some difficult, but all necessary. What kind of conversations? Jake asked, still trying to recover from the alien alcohol. About integration, Patricia explained. About how different species work together effectively. About respecting capabilities while not exploiting them. Your incident has become a case study in cross-species cooperation and the ethical questions it raises. She looked out at the city lights. Humanity has been part of the galactic community for 30 years, but we are still figuring out our place. We are not the smartest species. We are not the strongest. We are not the most advanced, but we are adaptable and we care about others. Those qualities matter. Jake thought about his crew back on Zenith 7. He thought about Vexilor's careful planning, Tilmo's skilled hands, the other workers from a dozen different species all contributing their unique abilities. It is not about being the best at one thing, he said slowly. It is about everyone being good at different things and working together. Exactly, Patricia agreed. And that message needs to spread. Too many species still think in terms of hierarchy, of superior and inferior. You showed them a different model, mutual support, complementary strengths. The next day, Jake gave interviews to news networks from across the galaxy. He repeated his message again and again. Humans are durable, yes, but that is not what defines them. Humans choose to help others. Humans value friendship across species lines. Humans adapt and cooperate. Some reporters wanted sensational stories about human superstrength. Jake refused to provide them. Other reporters wanted to paint humans as selfless heroes. Jake pushed back on that too. We are not heroes, he insisted. We are just people trying to do right by others. Sometimes that means taking risks. Sometimes it means getting hurt. But it is always a choice. On his last night on Centaurus Prime, Jake attended a formal reception. Delegates from dozens of worlds mingled, discussing trade agreements, research partnerships, and cultural exchanges. Jake felt out of place among the diplomats and officials, but Tilmo stayed close, providing silent support. A young Krashi approached Jake nervously. Her name was Sil Ava, and she worked for a construction company that employed mixed-species crews. Mr. Morrison, I wanted to thank you. Before your incident, our company treated humans as just another species of worker. Now we are redesigning our safety protocols to account for different capabilities. We are training crews to understand each other's strengths and limitations. That is good, Jake said. That is what should happen. But more than that, Sileva continued, we are teaching crews to watch out for each other the way you watched out for Tilmo. Not because regulations require it, but because it is 4 months had passed since the beam fell. Jake Morrison stood in the same section of Zenith 7's docking bay where the incident had occurred, but everything looked different now. New safety systems lined the walls, backup power generators hummed in the background, and warning lights indicated multiple redundancies for the anti-gravity systems. Vexilor walked beside Jake, reviewing the updated safety protocols on his datapad. The Krashi supervisor had become almost obsessive about preventing another accident. The new systems should make equipment failures virtually impossible, he explained. But we also instituted new procedures for mixed-species work environments. What kind of procedures? Jake asked. Knowledge sharing, Vexilor said. Each species on the crew now receives training about the others. Physical capabilities, limitations, stress responses. We want everyone to understand their teammates. Jake nodded approvingly. That was the right approach. Not treating one species as superior, but recognizing that differences existed and could be managed intelligently. The construction crew had grown since Jake's return. There were new faces, both human and alien. A young human woman named Claire Peterson had joined as a junior engineer. She approached Jake nervously during the break, clearly wanting to ask something. "Mr. Morrison, can I ask you a question?" "Just Jake," he corrected gently. "And yes." "Did it hurt?" she asked. "When the beam fell." "Everyone says you barely reacted, but it must have hurt terribly." Jake considered lying, making it seem easier than it was, but he decided on honesty. "It hurt worse than anything I have ever experienced. I thought my back was breaking. I could not breathe. Every second felt like forever." Claire's eyes widened. "But you held on anyway?" "I held on because letting go meant Tilmo died. The pain did not matter compared to that." He paused. "But Claire, do not think I am special. Any human could have done it. The point is not that I am strong. The point is that I cared enough to try." The young engineer nodded slowly, processing this. "I understand. Thank you." As the workday continued, Jake noticed something interesting. The crew moved differently now. They watched out for each other more carefully. When Aurelian worked near heavy equipment, others positioned themselves nearby. When Akrashi climbed to high areas, spotters paid close attention. It was not just about humans protecting aliens. It was everyone protecting everyone. During lunch, Jake sat with his usual group. Tilmo had brought food from his homeworld, a paste made from aquatic plants that looked unappetizing but tasted surprisingly good. Vexilor carefully ate his mineral supplements, which resembled colorful rocks. Jake had his sandwich, which the aliens found equally strange. "I received a message from my family," Tilmo said between bites. "They want to visit the station again. My youngest daughter asks about you constantly. She calls you Uncle Jake." Jake smiled. The Relian family had visited twice since the incident, and Jake had grown fond of the children. They were curious about humans, asking endless questions about Earth and human customs. "Tell them they are welcome any time." A young Krashi engineer named Telvan joined their table. He was new to the station, having arrived just last week. "Is it true?" he asked Jake directly. "Did you really catch a 300-kilogram beam with your body?" Jake sighed. The question never quite went away. "Yes, it is true, but it is not as impressive as people make it sound. I got lucky with the angle. I got lucky the beam did not hit my head. I got lucky a lot of ways." "But you chose to be there," Telvan pressed. "That is what I find remarkable. You saw danger and moved toward it, not away." "Humans do that sometimes," Jake admitted. "We are not always smart about self-preservation, but we are loyal to our friends." The alarm suddenly blared through the docking bay. Jake's heart jumped, remembering the last time he heard that sound. But this was different. The automated voice calmly announced a structural failure in the lower cargo bay. An explosion had caused a collapse, and workers were trapped. Jake moved before thinking, running toward the emergency. Behind him, he heard others following: Vexilor, Tilmo, Claire, Telvan, and a dozen others. They reached the cargo bay in minutes, finding chaos waiting for them. A chemical reaction had caused a small explosion, weakening a support wall. The wall had partially collapsed, trapping 4 workers behind rubble. Smoke filled the area, and the structure groaned ominously, threatening further collapse. The station's emergency coordinator, a Tyrillian named Grath, was already on scene. His thick hide was blackened from smoke, and he shouted orders to the rescue teams. "We cannot cut through. The vibration might bring down the rest of the wall. We need to stabilize and lift." Jake assessed the situation quickly. The collapsed section weighed several tons, far too much for any individual to handle, but it could be managed with the right approach. "We need bracing," he called out, "and leverage points. We lifted enough to pull them out." Vexilor was already calculating. His datapad flashed with structural analysis. If we place supports here, here, and here, we can create a stable lift corridor, but someone needs to go under to attach the equipment. Everyone looked at Jake. Of course they did. He was the human who could take punishment. He was the one who had done it before. But Jake shook his head. Not just me. We do this together. He pointed to Kevin Brooks, a human rescue specialist who had arrived with proper equipment. Kevin, you and I go under. We are both trained for this. Claire, you work the lift controls. Tilmo, you manipulate the support beams with those 4 arms. Vexilor, you calculate everything and tell us what to do. Grath, you coordinate from here. For a moment, no one moved. Then Kevin nodded. Smart plan. Let us go. The rescue took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Jake and Kevin crawled under the unstable rubble, attaching lift cables to reinforced points. The structure groaned above them, dropping dust and small debris. Jake's heart pounded, remembering the weight of the beam on his back. But Kevin was beside him, working calmly, and that helped. Tilmo's 4 arms positioned support beams with precision, creating a framework that would prevent total collapse. Vexilor's calculations guided every move, his voice steady over the communicators. Claire operated the lift controls with careful attention, raising the collapsed section millimeter by millimeter. When they finally pulled the trapped workers free, all 4 were alive. Injured, scared, covered in dust, but alive. The medical team rushed in to treat them, while the rescue crew backed away from the unstable area. Jake emerged from under the rubble, his clothes torn and his hands bleeding from scrapes. Kevin looked the same. They had both taken risks, but they had done it together, supported by the whole team. Grath approached them, his large eyes showing respect. That was well executed. A successful multi-species rescue operation. That is what it should always be, Jake said, breathing hard. No one species doing everything, everyone contributing what they can. Later, in the medical bay, Dr. Lisa Chen treated Jake's minor injuries while shaking her head. You promised me you would avoid dangerous situations. I did not promise that, Jake corrected. I promised I would be careful, and I was. I did not carry the weight alone this time. Dr. Chen smiled despite herself. Progress, I suppose. Tilmo entered the medical bay carrying a tray of drinks. He distributed them to Jake, Kevin, Claire, and several others who had participated in the rescue. A tradition from my world, after facing danger together, we share drinks and tell stories. They sat together, humans and aliens, sharing their experiences. Claire talked about her fear when the alarm sounded. Telvan admitted he had frozen at first, unsure what to do. Kevin shared stories from other rescues he had worked. Vexilor, surprising everyone, told a story from his youth when he had nearly died in a construction accident on his homeworld. We all face danger sometimes, the Krashi said quietly. What matters is how we respond. Do we run? Do we hide? Or do we help each other survive? Jake listened to the stories and felt something settle in his chest. The weight of being the human who caught the beam was finally lifting. He was not special. He was not unique. He was part of a team, and that team included beings from across the galaxy. Days later, Jake received a message from Ambassador Patricia Wells on Centaurus Prime. She informed him that the Galactic Workplace Safety Council had adopted new standards based on the Zenith 7 protocols. Mixed-species crews across the galaxy would now receive cross-training about each other's capabilities. Safety systems would account for different physiologies. And most importantly, the culture was shifting from individual heroism to team cooperation. Jake deleted the message without responding. He did not need recognition. He just wanted to work. That evening, he stood at the same viewport where he had stood months ago, watching the stars. Tilmo joined him, as he often did during quiet moments. The Relian's children had drawn pictures of Jake fighting monsters, which was not accurate but was amusing. Do you regret it? Tilmo asked, catching the beam. Starting all of this, Jake thought about the question carefully. He thought about the pain, the attention, the pressure. But he also thought about the changes on the station, the improved safety protocols, the way crews work together now. He thought about Kevin and Claire, and all the others who were learning that strength came in many forms. No, he said finally, I do not regret it. I just wish people would stop acting like it was extraordinary. But it was extraordinary, Tilmo insisted gently. Not because of what your body could do, but because of what your heart chose to do. On Earth, Jake's mother received another package. This time it was a formal commendation from the Galactic Workplace Safety Council, recognizing her son's contribution to cross-species cooperation. She read it with pride, but without surprise. Her son had always been the type to help others, even when it cost him something. She placed the commendation on a shelf next to the Relian bond token, creating a small shrine to her son's adventures in space. But when Jake came home for his next visit, she would not make a big deal of it. She would simply hug him, feed him real Earth food, and ask about his work. Because that was what family did. They supported each other without needing medals or recognition. They were proud without being boastful. They loved without requiring grand gestures. And in that way, Jake's mother was very much like her son. The story of the human who stopped a 300-kilogram collapse with his body became a legend in some circles. It appeared in training manuals and safety courses. It was referenced in academic papers about cross-species cooperation. Some versions were exaggerated, claiming Jake held the beam for minutes instead of seconds. Other versions focused on different aspects, emphasizing the technology or the team response. But the truth was simpler than any legend. A man saw his friend in danger. He moved to help. He survived because his body could take the punishment. And in doing so, he reminded the galaxy that capability without compassion was empty, but compassion backed by capability could change things. Jake Morrison returned to his work on Zenith 7. He installed beams and welded joints and calculated loads. He shared meals with Tilmo and discussed projects with Vexilor and trained new engineers like Claire. He lived his life, occasionally giving interviews when asked, but mostly trying to fade back into comfortable anonymity. The galaxy had learned something about humans, that they were tougher than they looked, that they acted on instinct sometimes, that they valued friendship across species boundaries, that they could be counted on in crisis. But more importantly, the galaxy had learned something about cooperation, that differences could be strengths when properly respected, that teams worked better than individuals, that the future of the galactic community depended not on which species was superior, but on how well different species could work together. And if one human engineer's stubborn refusal to let his friend die helped teach those lessons, then maybe the pain had been worth it. Jake stood in the docking bay, watching a new beam being installed with all the updated safety protocols in place. The work proceeded smoothly, efficiently, safely. No one was in danger. No one needed to play hero. And that, Jake thought, was exactly how it should be. The galaxy moved on. Stories faded. New incidents and new heroes emerged. But on Zenith 7, in a small corner of space where many species worked together, the lesson remained. Capability varies. Courage is universal. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you need help from others. Jake Morrison learned that lesson the hard way with 300 kilograms on his back. But he learned it well. Right. As Jake prepared to leave Centaurus Prime and return to Zenith 7, he felt exhausted but oddly satisfied. He had not changed the galaxy. He had not solved all problems or answered all questions. But he had started conversations that needed to happen. Dr. Chen found him in the shuttle bay, preparing for departure. Ready to go home? More than ready, Jake said. I miss my work, I miss my routine, I miss being anonymous. You will never be fully anonymous again, Dr. Chen warned. But the attention will fade. Eventually, you will just be Jake Morrison, engineer again, with maybe a footnote in history books. Jake smiled. I can live with a footnote. The shuttle lifted off, carrying them away from Centaurus Prime and back toward Zenith 7. Jake watched the planet shrink below them, becoming just another light among millions. In the vastness of space, his story was small. But small stories sometimes made big differences, and sometimes that was enough. A message came through on Dr. Chen's communicator. She read it and smiled. You have been invited to speak at the Galactic Workplace Safety Conference on Centaurus Prime next month. They want you to share your perspective. Jake groaned. More talking? More being stared at? More opportunities to shape how humans are understood, Dr. Chen corrected. You started this, Jake. Now you get to help finish it. He thought about refusing, but then he remembered Tilmo's face when the beam fell. He remembered the fear in Vexilor's eyes. He remembered all the aliens who had come to the medical bay to see if he was real. The galaxy was learning about humans. He had a chance to influence what they learned. That responsibility felt heavy, heavier than any beam. But like the beam, he would carry it, because that was what humans did. As the crowd began to disperse, Jake felt the medication pulling him towards sleep. The pain was becoming distant, muffled. He heard Dr. Chen giving instructions to the medical staff about his care. He felt Tilmo's hand finally touch his arm gently, a gesture of gratitude and friendship. Just before sleep claimed him, Jake heard Sola speaking to Dr. Chen in a quiet voice. The galaxy has encountered many species. Some are brilliant, some are ancient, some are powerful. But I have never seen a species quite like humans. You sacrifice yourselves so easily, and yet you survive what should destroy you. Dr. Chen's response was the last thing Jake heard before darkness took him. Welcome to humanity. We are tougher than we look, and more foolish than we should be. But we take care of our own, no matter what species they are. His head to look at Tilmo. The Relian was still standing there, all four arms wrapped around his body, staring at the spot where Jake had caught the beam. Vexilor walked beside the stretcher, his long legs keeping pace easily. He looked down at Jake, and the human saw something in those large black eyes that he had never seen before. It was not just surprise or shock. It was something deeper. It was the look of someone whose understanding of the universe had just been challenged. As they entered the medical bay, Jake heard Vexilor speaking quietly to Dr. Chen. The supervisor's voice was filled with confusion and disbelief. He should be dead, Vexilor said. No one survives that. No one catches that much weight with their body. It is not possible. Dr. Chen did not respond. She was too busy running her medical scanner over Jake's body, her face tight with concentration, but Jake saw her eyes flick toward Vexilor for just a moment. And in that moment, he saw her silent response. It was not possible for most species, but humans were different. Humans were strange, and the galaxy was about to learn just how strange they could be.